What is often overlooked on supervisor responsibilities. My name is Christopher Smarlik from People Safety Solutions, and welcome to Impact, our weekly HSE management videos. When I look into supervisor responsibilities, I see very often that we just try to copy some legal responsibilities and just make supervisors sign off for the whole thing. So there's a paper document somewhere around where you just write down what is already written in the legal requirements, and you try to put or push responsibilities towards the supervisor, which very often gets a certain taste, which feels like I try to find somebody who is responsible, so if something is going wrong, I can kick them somewhere, I can just hold them accountable for, so I take my legal obligation away from me and then just put it to somebody else. Well, this generally is a right way to look at it, or let's say at least one way to look at it. Very often these delegations of responsibilities, supervisor responsibilities, fall short because a core element is overlooked in many cases. If you copy these responsibilities, then sometimes it's implied that a certain rule has to be followed, but which are these rules is often not specifically written out there. So what I want to look into here is the topic of risk assessment. From my perspective, doing risk assessment the proper way and delegating it the right way and formulating what we expect there will cover usually more than 80% of all the supervisor responsibilities. And it can be boiled down to three elements. They all connected to the risk assessment. And the first one is probably one of the biggest issues, is own it. Owning the risk assessment is probably one of the core elements, cornerstones of the whole thing. Because if you look into organizations today, there is like an HSE manager, HSE person, HSE engineer, preparing a document, Excel file, writing down there, oh, there's a mechanical risk, there are electrical risk, chemical risk, whatever, and writing down a rating, giving some ideas about, oh, you have to wear PPE, whatever it is, and just have one document ready, handing it over to a supervisor and asking them, can you please sign it off because you're legally in charge to do so. Supervisor says, oh, I don't have time, so I'll just give it to me, signing it off, if at all, or sometimes it's just forgotten, and then exercise done, never looked at it again. And this has nothing to do with ownership. So owning, from my perspective, is the supervisor is responsible for conducting the risk assessment, doing really a risk assessment together with the people. And by doing that, you already do a training with your employees. You involve them. You get all of these things which are, for example, in the ISO 1445000 specifically described about involvement of employees, engagement. You get this one if you own it and say, I want to have this as a living document. I want to make sure that I get my people into it, that we work together on defining what are the risks and hazards around here, what are specific actions we want to take to bring it down to an acceptable risk level. So owning the risk assessment is probably the most important thing. The second one to that is then implementing a risk assessment. And the implementation means making all of these things happen. A risk assessment will tell you, if it's properly done, that people need to be trained in a proper way, that PPE has to be provided adequately to the risk, and that technical or other solutions need to be in place. So a supervisor needs to make sure that these things which he or she specifically defined in there are now realized. In order to do so, the organization has a task. The organization now has to make sure that the supervisor is able to do it. If I give responsibility, then for sure we need to have additional to the whole thing, we need to have the means to do so. So competency, we need to have the money or funds available to let the supervisor live up to their responsibilities. So competence in certain cases can be given in by support of an HSE person, internal, external. And support means the supervisor asks for the support and is not pushed into it. Because let's face it, the only person who really can give you an answer about what is the risk around here, what are the actions which should be taken, is the person performing the task by themselves. And, well, and by that, the supervisor is the only one who can give you adequate answers to the whole story. Let's take it short. The supervisor needs to do it. The supervisor is the only one who can do it, and therefore implementing is the second responsibility of a supervisor in there. And the third one is something about management. It means improve it. So you need for sure to improve your risk assessment on a continuous basis, and that doesn't mean only once a year. Very often, if you just look into the legal requirements or legal framework of the whole thing, then what you have there is on an annual basis has to be reviewed, which means, oh, there's a paper exercise, so once a year just check it off. If you own it already, if you use it as a basis to train your people, you will have it much more often updated. So by that, it would be not relevant to mention this any further. But improvement means also to look into other areas which were not covered before. This means on the one side risks which we were not aware before. Right now here we have the coronavirus thing going around. This would be one area you might want to look into because it's a new risk which was not worked on that much previously. The other thing are changes in tasks, new areas, things which you probably have forgotten, overlooked, that were not in your 80% focus area at the beginning. So this is one thing where you can improve on. Well, second thing is the methodology. So might be you learn a different way how you can assess a risk. Might be you find a new way how you can solve an issue. And for that, external viewpoints are crucial. If you only look into your own area, you might not get a new input. You might not get something which is really bringing you further. Therefore, bringing other people in from other companies or consultants or colleagues from a different department or even from a different industry can be very, very helpful just to widen the horizon and to see new ways and might be more easy ways to solve a risk. And for sure, the third thing in the improvement is reduce the risk level continuously. The acceptance of a risk has changed over the years. A risk which was acceptable 10, 15, 20 years ago is probably not acceptable today. You might know a lot of these old black-white pictures showing catastrophic, disastrous situations with a high-risk exposure to the employees working in high-rise buildings. Just as one example, or when we talk about safety belts in a car, or behavior towards smoking, not using everyday drugs, or these things definitely have changed over the years, and therefore our risk acceptance level is also going down. So bring it all together. Supervisor responsibilities, focusing it or just drilling it down to the very, very core thing is own the risk assessment, implement the risk assessment, and improve the risk assessment on a continuous basis. So if you delegate supervisor responsibilities in a written form, make sure that these things are included. It deals all with the risk assessment, owning it, implementing it, and improving it. If you've done this one, 80% of the job is done. If you need any assistance, any ideas about how you can effectively do this, let's have a chat together. You know where you find me. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Bye.